A few weeks ago, The Hunger Games on Stage began previews at the Troubadour Canary Wharf Theatre in London, and it was a bit of a mess, to put it nicely. I went to see this show on the third night it was open, Wednesday, October 22nd, and I have thoughts. Before we begin, I saw some people online say it's unfair to judge a show based off its preview, and I think that's ridiculous. I don't think shows should be exempt from criticism just because they're still figuring it out. If you're charging people more than $0 to see your preview, I am allowed to judge it. Previews are not in a magical bubble outside of context or undeserving of critique. If your doors are open and you're charging people to see the show, they should be allowed to form their opinions based off what they see and not have to come back once it's open before making any judgments. Previews are a time for the audience to pay to be guinea pigs for the creative team, and in exchange, I get to talk about the show on the internet. Call me the girl on fire because this is a comprehensive roast of The Hunger Games on Stage, and may the odds be ever in your favor. Act 1 of the play follows the plot of the first 100-ish pages of the book. 16-year-old Katniss Everdeen and her best friend Gale hunt in the forest before preparing for the reaping of the 74th Hunger Games, an annual event where one boy and one girl between the ages of 12 to 18 are chosen from each of the 12 districts to fight to the death in the capital. Despite only having her name entered once, Katniss's 12-year-old sister Primrose Everdeen is chosen as the female tribute for District 12, and Katniss volunteers to take her place.
I volunteer as tribute!
The baker's son, Peeta Mellark, is chosen as the boy tribute. They are mentored by the only living victor from District 12, Haymitch Abernathy, a notorious drunkard who Katniss resents immediately. Katniss and Peeta have 3 opportunities to impress the capital citizens prior to the games: the chariot parade, the private performance for the game makers, and the interview with Caesar Flickerman. Their stylist Cinna helps them stand out with his innovative outfits utilizing synthetic flames. Peeta confesses to having a crush on Katniss for years during his interview, which she does not take well.
What the hell was that?
And then they are ready for the games to begin. All of this is the same in the play and the book, and it feels like the show is trying to distance itself from the movies by being as true to the novel as possible, but every once in a while it selectively decides to be like the movies. For example, Katniss actress Mia Carragher looks a lot like Jennifer Lawrence, and I think this was part of the reason why they cast her. They also use the arrangements of the songs from the movies for the Hanging Tree, Deep in the Meadow, the Mockingjay Whistle, and the Capitol theme, which draws direct comparisons to the movies. I believe they can do this because Lionsgate owns the license for the Hunger Games, so the play can theoretically use the songs from the film at no extra cost. To keep in line with the books, they included some very poorly incorporated narration. Katniss speaks her internal monologue out loud, which is a choice I dislike. It's trying to be like the Twilight intro.
I'd never given much thought to how I would die, but dying in the place of someone I love seems like a good way to go.
Instead, it feels like she's reading her diary aloud. There are so many things that can and should be communicated visually in this show, but they use dialogue instead, and it felt very clunky to me. Katniss explains to the audience that Prim is only entered in the reaping once, while she and Gale have a bunch of entries. Versus in the movie, Katniss comforts Prim by telling her that she's only entered once.
It's your first year, Prim. Your name's only been in there once. They're not gonna pick you.
Both of these are examples of exposition, but one makes you care about the relationship between the characters, and the other does not. The play doesn't trust the audience to understand visuals. Katniss has to tell us verbally that the fence is not electrified, and she knows this because the electricity is only on for a few hours a day, so she listens to the fence to check it. In the movie, we see the bright warning sign on the fence and then watch Katniss sneaking under anyway, implying that the electric fence is not actually electrified. You get the same message, but one feels insecure and the other feels like visual storytelling. Saying the inner monologue out loud felt like high school performance art.
They call it see world, but they don't see the world. They
see walls.
They
see tanks.
They
see nothing.
This, along with the unnatural American accent, resulted in Katniss giving a really wooden performance in the first act. She felt dull and uninteresting. Her monologues felt like recitations of book passages and did not come across as natural. It felt more like the hollow, depressed Katniss from the beginning of Catching Fire rather than Katniss from book 1. All the American accents need work. Peeta seemed to have the toughest time, but everyone really struggled with the accents. And because of that, a lot of the performances felt stilted and flat in a way that I don't think they would have been if the actors had used their natural British voices. This was not just my opinion. When I walked out of the theater for intermission, a cluster of Brits were loudly commenting on how atrocious the accents were. A lot of the other tributes did not speak at all in Act 1, and when they finally did in Act 2, they did not have good American accents. I saw some people commenting online that they should all be doing different regional accents from around the US because the 13 districts and the capital are all supposed to be different parts of the United States, but I'm not that picky. I'm fine with them having a generic standard American accent, but I do think they need to have an American accent. The Hunger Games takes place in a dystopian future of a post-war United States of America, now called Pan Am, and an American accent is essential to convey this. Hire me on the West End. Apparently all they do is American shows there, and I love going to London. The cast itself is very small. There are only 14 tributes from the top of the show, so we never have a full group of 24 tributes, which is fine because the theater could not physically accommodate any more people. That being said, it was noticeable and honestly funny during the reaping. There are simply not enough actors to make it feel surprising when Prim's name is called. In the movie, they have maybe 100 girls and a similar number of boys, so it feels shocking when Prim is called out of everyone. During the bows, it looked like a full cast, but during the reaping, they were divided into boys and girls, which cut the cast in half. So Prim had a 1 in 8 chance of being called, and the odds were not in her favor. I understand why they did this, but it did make it feel significantly less surprising. In the movie, Katniss can hardly see Prim, and here, the Everdeen family is 56% of the women on stage. This play does not have much of a set for District 12, or really any part of the show, which I think does it a disservice. In the film, the audience can see the similarities between District 12 and the arena, so we know Katniss has an advantage during the games. The play has very few physical sets. There is one giant trapdoor in the middle of the stage where big set pieces such as the train, the apartment, and the cornucopia rise up, and 4 small trapdoors, one in each corner, to bring out smaller set pieces. This trapdoor was absolutely carrying the show. Shout out to the trapdoor operators. The rest of the stage is pretty sparse, with screens taking up the north and south walls. The screens worked for the Capitol and the moments that were supposed to be recorded, but I didn't like when they used it instead of a physical set. I don't like screens in my plays or musicals. I understand that they are cheaper, but that's because the art is not good quality and often does not match the aesthetic of the show. They never look real to me, and they often take me out of the narrative. Additionally, the trees and other physical sets that they do have appear to be made of metal, so they don't look like the woodlands near Katniss's home at all. We can't see the parallels between the two locations because of the lack of a physical set. I will mention that they do a great job using their vertical space. The physical stage is really small. It doesn't look small when it's empty, but once you add 14 tributes, it feels very cramped very quickly, so they make use of their vertical space by having a lot of story moments take place in the sky, which is a creative way to accommodate this limited space. Sets rise from the ground or lower from the ceiling in a way that feels really cool, even if it's not as futuristic as the Capitol in the movies. The only set decor that is brought from a secondary location are the balls full of tribute names. These are rolled across the stage by 2 actors, which I noted because it looked kind of silly to me. Otherwise, the set is minimal and relies heavily on screens, which I disliked. The sets aren't the only futuristic thing in the theater. The seats also move, which I thought was very cool. I know it's a gimmick, but it excited me every time it happened. Specific sections can rotate to create more space for story events. The original design for the theater was in the round, and that concept art was posted on Instagram back in March. However, somewhere along the building process, I think the team determined that this was just not enough space for the stage, so they modified the seating to be a theater in the hexagon, and then the seats moved to create additional real estate. As you can see from this ticket chart, each section is labeled as a different district. I'll talk more about the others in Act 2. Right now, the only 2 you need to worry about are Districts 1 and 2 because these are the seats that move throughout the show. I'm pretty sure both of these sections are on tracks, so they can slide until they are in line with the big middle sections, leaving a clear hallway for scenes to play out. The reaping was the first time this happened. Then they used it again for the chariot parade, some of the training sequences, and when Katniss performs for the game makers. I was trying to take a mental note every time it happened, but the seats moved back to their original positions in between, so it did get a little muddled. In case it's not clear from the moving seats, this show is big on spectacle. Both acts open the same way, counting down before the cornucopia fight. This start emphasized that the play was glorifying the violence of the games in a way that felt insensitive at times. This opening was very jarring and also didn't really make sense as the start of the show. I guess it was supposed to be a flash forward in the narrative, but it felt tonally inconsistent with the first half of the play. If you didn't know the Hunger Games, this would be a huge spoiler. Katniss monologues as the game makers count down, and she talks about seeing Peeta, so that completely ruins any and all dramatic tension during the reaping. I honestly can't fathom why they had this opener. I think they were worried that if they started with Katniss hanging out in the woods, people might not be prepared for all the violence later in the play. This does make sense, but death in theater is usually not as graphic as it is in books or movies, at least in my experience. This opener established the priorities of the production, and I don't mean that as a compliment. One of the biggest spectacles was the chariot parade, where Katniss and Peeta's chariot was suspended on wires and real flames shot from the ground as they passed specific points on stage. This was admittedly one of the coolest parts of the show. They deserve points for how cool this sequence looks. The timing of the fire was really well done and looked excellent. However, it felt like this show added spectacle to moments that were originally more subdued because they were worried about losing the audience's attention. During training, there's a sequence where Katniss and Peeta climb a net ladder suspended in the air while Haymitch belays them in real time. They chose this setting for the moment when Peeta tells Katniss about how his mother didn't believe he was going to win. This completely undercuts the emotion of the scene because I could not focus on Peeta's words while I was watching them climb the rigging to fight Davy Jones. Whereas in the movie, this scene took place on the train and felt more grounded in the emotion rather than the exciting visuals.
You know what my mother said? She said District 12 might finally have a winner, but she wasn't talking about me.
The reliance on spectacle during moments that should be more subdued made the show feel very one note. The movie and the book do a great job of illustrating the difference between the spectacle of the Capitol and the humanity of the tributes. This play doesn't make me feel for Katniss and Peeta as people before showing them as objects for spectacle. However, for a show that was 75% spectacle, I was not impressed with the costumes. The outfits in the Capitol were underwhelming and looked like they were not custom made for the show. I'm pretty sure they were custom made, so this is a very weird problem to have. They added in more colors during the reaping, so Effie didn't stand out as much as she was supposed to. I think the movie nailed it, especially with the color grading, because you can see how drab and dusty everyone else looks, which makes Effie's purple ensemble feel incredibly gauche. I didn't like anything Effie wore, and same goes for Cinna. I can't remember if he changed his costumes, but Cinna is in a bright blue suit for most of the show, which was really boring to me. He's supposed to be an innovative and subversive designer, but we don't see this. Once again, I think the movie nailed it because Cinna stands out and does not look like everyone else in the Capitol. He wears a lot of dark, rich colors, and his main accent color is his gold eyeshadow. He looks edgy and alternative in this sea of bright, poofy outfits. On stage, he blended in with the rest of the crowd. Katniss, and by proxy the audience, are supposed to trust Cinna because he's more sympathetic than anyone else she meets, but I didn't trust him because he felt like every other Capitol citizen. The coolest costume is Katniss and Peeta's chariot outfit, which is a long jacket that has lights underneath it to make it look like a piece of coal, and they have smoke pouring out of either the jacket itself, or maybe this was coming from a hidden mechanism in the chariot. Either way, this effect was very cool to see, and it looked great. However, the jacket is white for some reason, which I found very weird. I think it should have been black like coal. This would have made the lights stand out, and it would have been more consistent with previous media. It's not a big deal, but it did bug me. As I said, the play feels like it's trying to distance itself from the movie, but the movie is pretty close to the book, so that's very difficult to achieve. They do include some moments that were exclusive to the book, such as Haymitch falling off the stage during the reaping. They also note that the mutts in Act 2 have the faces of the dead contestants. This works because they have the dead contestants play the mutts in this scene, which I thought was a smart way to communicate this. But Katniss does comment on it directly in her external monologue, just in case you missed it. The humanoid traits of the mutts are downplayed in all the movies, and I do think that's a good thing. The CGI probably would have looked bad, and I just don't see how they could communicate this without it turning into cats.
No.
I always felt like I could see similarities between the mutts and the dead tributes when it holds on the mutts' eyes, but that might have been wishful thinking on my part. However, not everything was faithful to the books. Effie's performance was the most noticeably different for me because she felt boring, which was weird and bad for this character. Effie is supposed to be gaudy, over the top, and out of touch. She is attentive to fashion trends and tends to be unsympathetic when she talks to Katniss and Peeta. In the first book, she starts as just another Capitol citizen, and she eventually grows into their friend and confidant over the course of several books. I think if they wanted to get away from the Elizabeth Banks performance, another option would be to do something more akin to the Broadway Madame Morrible performance from Wicked.
All right, Alphaba, get the show on the road.
This is actually how I read Effie in the books when I was young. I always imagined Effie as slightly older and clinging to the facets of youth. Like a great aunt who always wears a real mink coat and garters, yet she insists on having the bartender check her ID. She is the most theatrical character in the story.
That is mahogany.
So this role should have been the most fitting on stage, and instead Effie's scenes felt low energy and awkward. They also made some changes that were not in either previous iteration. After the chariot parade, there's a weird little moment where Kato fake proposes to Clove. I thought this was fine. I've seen a lot of people online saying how much they hated this, but it just didn't really bother me for some reason. During Katniss's interview, her dress doesn't light up with synthetic flames. I didn't really expect them to do this, and I know it wasn't included because it was hard to do safely, but I do think they could have done a little something. Katniss still does the spin, but now she's just twirling for the sake of twirling, which feels a little silly. Obviously, real flames would have been dangerous, but they could have used some orange fabric hidden into compartments in the dress that only become visible when the dress is in motion, or if they really wanted to, they could have done a whole dress transformation like the fairy godmother in Cinderella as a nod to her catching fire dress reveal. Also, during the interviews, Katniss sits on stage with Peeta while he talks to Caesar, and I did not like that. For me, it spoiled the surprise about Peeta's crush and made it feel disingenuous on his part. I think they just didn't know where else to put Katniss for this scene to communicate that Katniss can hear Peeta's interview, but to that I say, you could literally put her anywhere on stage. This theater is not very big, and if you put one single light on her, the entire audience would be able to see her no problem. In a perfect world, I would have put her within Peeta's sightlines so he can stare at her longingly while he talks to Caesar. Katniss can interpret this as manipulative fuel for her conspiracy theories, while Peeta can see the object of his affection and let that influence his tone and emotion. Peeta is very emotionally intelligent, so he could be looking to gauge her reaction to his confession, thus making the slap off stage more surprising and creating greater contrast. Once again, this felt like the play was sacrificing a smaller moment in favor of making more of a spectacle that ultimately felt less fulfilling. One thing I really liked during Act 1 was the moment Katniss arrives in the Capitol. Before she meets Cinna, Katniss gets cleaned up, and they have this cute sequence with the hygienist. Katniss shimmies into one of the smaller trapdoors, and then the hygienists walk around to each one as if Katniss is having a different procedure done inside. They have bubbles come out of one spot and laser hair removal in another, and it was all done in a fun, cute way that just felt really well integrated with the stage. Now that it's intermission, I would like to tell you a little story about the venue for the show. The Troubadour Theater Canary Wharf group announced they were officially building the theater in late February, and I couldn't pinpoint when they actually broke ground on the building itself, but I believe it was near the end of February as well. The earliest evidence I could find was from March, but it did look like they had been working for a little bit at that point. In that same press release, they announced that The Hunger Games would be the first show to christen the theater, and that both would be opening in October 2025. Now, I've never built a building before, but 9 months does not seem like a lot of time in which to make that happen. The theater is the first of several projects by Troubadour Theatres, who are building temporary stages around the City of London in an effort to develop specific areas. Their next project, is the Troubadour Greenwich Peninsula Theatre, which is set to open in 2026, and they have already stated online that it is meant to be demolished in 8 to 10 years and be turned into housing developments or basically whatever else they can sell the land for. That does not inspire confidence in me. If something is designed to be demolished in 8 to 10 years, do you think they're going to use the same quality of materials as something that is built to last forever? Because I don't. The Troubadour Canary Wharf feels like the Avengers campus in Disney's California Adventure. Everything is screen-based, minimally decorated, and coldly generic so that it can be turned into something else the second it's not profitable anymore. Nothing too sturdy or memorable that can't be overlaid when the current IP is no longer in, which is antithetical to the idea of a custom-made project, at least it is to me. This theater is in the heart of a financial district very far from the rest of the West End. On Broadway, all of the theaters are clustered together with Times Square as the main hub. Most theaters are within a 5-minute walk of the TKTS stairs. On the West End, there doesn't seem to be one central hub, but the theaters are semi-close to each other. The Troubadour Canary Wharf is on the complete other side of town. Someone else tell me if this is unusual for London. I just felt like this theater was in the middle of nowhere. The simple fact of the matter is that the theater is not done. Many parts of it are and were still being built when the show opened, which is a very unique problem and one I had never encountered before. This is my #1 issue with the show, which is unfortunate, but I think the theater plays a big role in how you experience a show, and the overall theater-going experience at the Troubadour was rough. The Troubadour Theater was custom built. I hate seeing everybody online saying how this was a custom job. Like, they emphasize it in all of the marketing, like, oh, it was custom built, it was custom built. And I'm like, no, it's not done. it is being custom built.
Purpose-built theater.
They built this entire stage for the show.
Brand new theatre. They've built a new theatre.
Built to hold this world premiere of the show.
The Troubadour Theatre was custom built in the most rushed job I've ever seen in a theater. In case you can't tell from my accent, I am not from London, so I thought the Troubadour was an existing theater that was being renovated, so I was cutting it some slack. But finding out that this was a made-to-order brand new theater caused me to lose all respect for the producers. There were safety hazards and unfinished pieces everywhere.
Ooh. Lovely exposed wires.
Wet paint signs everywhere, including this one that was blocking my view of the show. Construction signs. There were no bins, so everyone left their trash under their seats in this brand new, beautiful theater. This is a little thing, but the ladies' toilet did not have a hook to hang your purse, so my sister and I had to take turns. It's not a big deal, and especially not a big deal when compared to the rest of the issues on this list, but this is supposed to be a state-of-the-art brand new theater, and they were too cheap to buy the doors with hooks on them for the ladies' room. This toilet was clearly designed by a man or a woman who hates women. I didn't take any photos inside because that would be weird, but the bathroom interior looked and felt like a carnival tent and had absolutely insane lighting. I think they only had one bulb turned on and that's it. There was a distinctly footy aroma in the stairwell. When I was coming back from intermission, I remarked on how the smell in the stairwell was a little weird, and the usher turned to me and goes, "Oh, I think it smells like hamster hay." There was a staircase right next to my seat, but that staircase was not finished, or at least it was not finished enough for guests to go to, so we weren't allowed to use it, and we had to walk past 50 people to get to our seats, to go to the bathroom, and to get back. It was an absolute nightmare. I was seated right next to an exit door, but we could not use it for some unknown reason. I did sneak a peek at it to see what was up, and it looked fine to me, but maybe the place it leads to is not finished. They did still let actors and ushers go that way. The upper platform thumps as people walk by and feels so shaky. I did not feel safe at all. The theater is not where it says it is on Google Maps. If you follow Google Maps, it will take you to an Amazon Fresh. The theater is located on the other side of this big whale sculpture. There are signs with big arrows guiding you as you leave the tube station, but it was still weird and feels hidden. We were advised by the usher to not leave during the performance because if we did, we might not be allowed back in, which is a crazy thing to be told before you sit down for a 3-hour play. As we were leaving the theater, the usher advised us not to go through certain doors because it's just not built yet. There wasn't a sign or anything saying, "Do not enter, you will fall to your death." Just a man, and if that man left his post for any reason, someone could die. That's insane. They could have at least been on theme and called it District 13. Finally, we have the bathroom tangent. The bathroom setup for this show was abysmal, and that is really funny to me. Not because it's funny, but because I think it's really pathetic. Anyone who has ever used the women's bathroom can tell you that there's always more demand for stalls than there is demand for urinals, and anyone who has ever been to the theater and used the women's bathroom at intermission can tell you that there was probably a line. So if you were custom building a theater, you would probably want to take this well-known piece of information into account when you were building the toilet. If I were custom building a theater, I would have a plethora of bathrooms with at least one ladies' room on each level containing 20 to 25 stalls apiece and a very efficient 2-door system. One door where guests enter the hall of stalls, a slightly adjacent space for the hand washing station, and then a second door next to the hand wash where people can exit. This creates an easy flow of traffic. And because you are building this entirely from scratch, you don't have to accommodate any weird pre-existing structures, and you can just build a bespoke perfect bathroom. Spoilers, but this is not what happened. The bathrooms at the Troubadour Theatre Canary Wharf are a logistical nightmare. They have maybe 10 stalls apiece and were definitely not built with their intended use in mind, which is downright insane to me. I don't know how they could have messed up the bathroom so badly. When my sister and I finally shimmied past all 50 chairs in our row, because remember, we could not use the stairwell nearest to us, so we were the last ones to leave for the interval, we walked downstairs into absolute chaos. There was already a line of at least 60 women waiting for the toilets. I was ready to give up and just hold it for the remainder of the night until one of the ushers informed us that if we wanted a shorter line, we could use the restroom of a nearby hotel. Sometime during Act 1 of the show, it began raining outside. I had left my umbrella at my seat because I wrongly assumed I would not need it during the intermission. So my sister and I ran into the street to find which of these identical brutalist corporate buildings was a hotel that would let us pee.
Ready? Go, go, go. Woo!
This was the most I felt like a Dickensian orphan during my entire London trip. We blindly ran into an office like, "Please, sir, can I pee here?" And the guy working the front was very kind and obviously had already dealt with this for the past 2 nights. So he gently walked us over to the correct hotel, which was so nice of him. He really didn't have to do that. And he was so kind to 2 wet American tourists who ran into his lobby asking where we could find the loo. And honestly, the hotel bathroom was lovely. They had a little hand lotion and everything. In case it's not obvious from my shocked tone, this is not normal. I have never experienced anything like this in my life, and I sincerely hope not to ever again. It was really funny to me in hindsight and in the moment because I think I just got to the point where I decided I could either laugh at everything or cry, and I always prefer laughing. Woo! Well done. But having people run to a nearby hotel's bathroom is not a solution. The website promised that Troubadour Theatre was putting in some special work and extra care into their bathroom situation, and then the final product was so horribly, laughably bad, I can't even describe it. For me, it was funny, but I imagine that if for any reason you cannot run in the rain because you have a health issue or a disability, or you're wearing heels, or heaven forbid you did your hair and makeup for an expensive night out at the theater, I feel like you would have been severely disappointed by this bathroom experience. I also saw a lot of people online talking about accessibility issues. People booked tickets that were labeled wheelchair accessible, but lo and behold, when they got to their seats, they could not see the stage. It seems like all of these people got refunds, but I was a little worried about this because the refund policy online seems very rigid and unhelpful. On the KX website, it says you can pay an extra £2 fee to purchase refundable tickets. However, I am hopeful that this doesn't mean you have to pay £2 if you get to the theater and your theoretically accessible seats turn out to be inaccessible. I did not experience this myself because I did not book an accessible seat, but I hope they all got full refunds on this. The website promised big things in terms of accessible seating, and they made grandiose promises about a custom bathroom experience, and it seems like neither of those things happened. It honestly felt like they built the theater as a static prop and completely forgot that human beings would be using this space. They did not playtest a single aspect of sitting in the theater. They didn't factor in bins, bathrooms, accessible seating, emergencies, or even needing to step out. The moving seats are really cool, but I can't fathom what a logistical nightmare it would be to have an emergency while the seats are sliding from one space to another. I imagine that if you needed to leave your seat while they are in the secondary position, you just can't exit, and you probably have to walk onto the stage area. I didn't see anyone attempt to leave during my performance, but that's probably because they were warned that they are trapped. To see this show, you would better have no health issues and be perfectly hydrated where you are not thirsty, but also never need to use the restroom for any reason during your 3-hour experience. My favorite. I think I would not be as hard on these complete and utter failures if it weren't for the fact that this building was custom built by the team, and they knew how much time they were giving themselves. The CEOs of Troubadour Theatres, Tristan Baker and Oliver Royds, created the first Troubadour Theatre, the Troubadour Wembley Park, back in 2018 when they converted the existing building of Fountain Studios into a theater. That renovation was supposed to be done in fall 2018 and did not officially open until 2019. They had at least a 6-month delay, and that was when they were working with a building that already had all its walls. How they thought they could build a custom theater with all these elaborate promises of grandeur is beyond me. But what upsets me the most is not that the theater isn't done. It's what they chose to complete. I assume part of the reason why the bathroom experience was so horrendous is because there are going to be bathrooms on the 3rd floor. The staircase to the 3rd floor lobby was blocked off. I imagine that in the future this area will be built and then guests can get a drink at the 3rd floor bar and use the additional restrooms on this level, but currently that is not the case. You have to go through what is essentially the service staircase because they did not bother to finish building this section of the theater before opening, hence all the women in the building being forced into the same 10 stalls. Instead of finishing the 3rd floor of the building, the team chose to finish the President Snow Suite. This is the VIP lounge where guests can have 2 glasses of champagne, appetizers, and a program prior to the show, as well as a drink and ice cream during the interval as part of an exclusive VIP package that costs $365 £35 per person. This is the single most sinister thing about this show. Everyone who did not buy this fancy package is going to have an astronomically worse time than the people who have access to the presidential lounge, and that is bad, bad, bad. The producers and everyone who supported the creation of the President's Snow Suite are the villains in this story, and you cannot convince me otherwise. To leave everyone sitting in District 11 with no amenities, no lobby, exposed wires, wet paint signs, and a half-finished emergency exit, while 10 elites sit in their fully furnished VIP lounge and enjoy sparkling wine at the Hunger Games is so ironic and dystopian, I don't even have words to convey my disdain. I'm not saying shows should not have a VIP lounge. I like VIP lounges just fine, but I think you are morally obligated to finish building your entire theater before putting any resources into a VIP lounge. I was seated in District 11, and I'm honestly really glad this is where I was seated. I think if I was anywhere else in the theater, I might not have noticed how poorly they were treating a select portion of the audience. I would have noticed that the whole building feels held together by toothpicks and chicken wire, but I don't think I would have seen how bad the third floor really is. I could not enjoy parts of the show because I kept thinking about how everything around me felt like it was one strong breeze away from falling apart, and I was genuinely worried about an emergency happening. The play uses real fire, real bows and arrows, and a lot of wire work. God forbid anything happens in that theater because they are not equipped to handle anything at this time. I don't even know if they had a fire alarm in the building. I couldn't relax because I was worried about planning my evacuation exit strategy, which just goes to show how unsafe this space felt. I have never checked the fire doors at Phantom of the Opera because they seem like they know what they're doing. There are heavy set pieces being suspended in the air above clusters of actors and bulky sets rising out of the giant trapdoor in the middle of the stage, and I was worried about all of it. I did not trust that the actors were safe when they were climbing on the sets or when they were suspended in the chariot. I was worried about their safety the entire time. And I don't mean that I was worried about the characters. I was concerned about the health and safety of the performers, because if the building itself has a multitude of safety risks, how well are the performers being protected?
The safety of it all and like trying to really commit to a scene emotionally and then remembering you have to be clipped into your harness a certain way.
Sitting in the audience, I did not feel confident that they had tested these ropes enough. Broadway performers, including Idina Menzel, have fallen through trapdoors and broken ribs. I joke about how much I loved seeing Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark, but that show had a multitude of injuries, and that was in a fully built theater. Most of this video is supposed to be a fun review about a play I saw, but this is the part where I'm being really serious. I am concerned for the health and safety of the performers in this play, and I could not enjoy the performance because the lack of care put into the physical theater made me feel unsafe as an audience member, causing me to spend a lot of the performance worried about the health and well-being of the actors. I felt like I was the only person in the room who wanted these kids to be safe. I want to be clear that I am not bashing the technical team of the Hunger Games. I do not know the stage manager or any of the stagehands, and I am not commenting on their performances. The show ran very smoothly when I saw it, and there has not been a single injury to my knowledge. Nor am I bashing any of the staff at the Troubadour Theater. All of the ushers, bartenders, ticket takers, and salespeople I interacted with were very lovely and kind. They know that this is not a good situation, and they seem sympathetic. They are just doing their jobs, and absolutely none of the issues I mentioned are their fault. It is the fault of the producers and the Troubadour Theater Group, not the minimum wage workers who are trying their best to keep guests from falling to their deaths, despite the best efforts of their corporate overlords. Now that we've all enjoyed our hotel bathroom break, let's check back in for Act 2 of the show. This act begins with a countdown to the games and Katniss running away from the cornucopia into the woods. They included all the major beats from the book and movie. Katniss finding water, the game makers corralling her with fire, hiding in a tree from the pack of careers, including Peeta, dropping the Tracker Jacker nest, being rescued by Rue, their alliance, taking out the career supplies, Rue's death, finding camouflage Peeta, getting medicine for Peeta at the cornucopia, fighting Clove, Thresh's rescue, kissing Peeta, Foxface's death, running from the Mutts, Cato's death, the Berry Bluff, and ending with Katniss and Peeta being crowned the winners in front of everyone in the Capitol. This is the better act of the show for me personally, and I enjoyed it a lot more than the first 2 hours of this play. My sister said, well, yeah, that's because Act 2 is the games and all the action stuff, but that's not the reason why I preferred Act 2. I actually disliked most of the fight sequences just because of how loud they were, and they used these strobe lights that temporarily blinded me a few times. To be clear, the fighting itself looked great, but I found the lights and sound to be overwhelming from where I was sitting. I liked Act 2 better because the monologues felt a lot more natural when Katniss was alone in the arena than it did when she was in 12. It made sense for her to talk to herself and by proxy the audience, and it didn't feel contrived in the same way as her exposition in the opening. And Act 2 is where all the emotional development happens. We see Katniss connecting with characters such as Rue, Peeta, and even Thresh, which we don't get in the first half of the show. Katniss didn't connect with Peeta, Haymitch, Effie, or Cinna in the first half. She had chemistry with Prim, but that only lasted about 5 minutes before Katniss was taken away for the Capitol. I am all about character growth. It's the #1 thing I look for in my media, and Act 2 is where that development happened. I felt they did a great job of showing Katniss's confusion and conflicting emotions regarding Peeta, while he feels like everything is real. She does love him, but that love comes about in the middle of a life or death situation and involves pressure from everyone around her. So she's not sure if it's real or if it is part of the gameplay. I don't think she knows why she ate the berries because she doesn't have time to process her feelings before she is told how she should feel by others and how she needs to feel in order to keep her loved ones safe. As I said, Act 2 opens very loudly and brightly. Because there are only 14 young people in the cast, they kill off the first 10 tributes pretty quickly. This frees some of the narrative space so that the final 14 tributes can have a bit more characterization and time in the story, which I do think was a smart move. They convey each of the deaths by having the actors stand in a diagonal line, then firing the cannon and shining a red spotlight on the dead tribute. I mentioned earlier that the audience is divided into districts, and one of the ways they incorporated the audience in the story is by having a corresponding red light shine on the district when the tribute from their district is killed.
When certain tributes die, their district of seats lights up red.
I think they also further divided this by having one side represent the girl tribute and the other side represent the boy tribute, but I think this was only implemented for districts 1, 2, and 11 because the rest of the districts were only represented once. I thought this was an interesting idea, but in practice, it is a bit weird. Districts 1 and 2 comprise the majority of the theater, and then 3, 4, 7, and 10 are each like 15 people at most. Maybe it was political commentary that I did not get, but the division of the districts felt disproportional, and also this felt very weird for the seating arrangement. I think most theater goers know that the balcony seats are worse and therefore less expensive, and the floor seats are better and likely cost more. There's an unspoken assumption that people sitting in the middle of row 8 paid significantly more than someone sitting in the last row of the mezzanine or balcony. But aside from the fact that you're in the balcony, the theater doesn't make you feel bad about being in the less expensive seats. At the Hunger Games, they want you to know that your seats are a direct reflection of your social status. If you are sitting in districts 1 or 2, that means you spent a good chunk of change to be there and you get to be the rich district. And if you didn't spend as much, you are a poor in District 11. This didn't offend me or anything. I just thought it was really funny and ironic considering the messaging of the book. District 11 was the only seat available when I booked, so I didn't feel bad about being a poor, but I thought it was really funny that the show wanted me to think about this. The audience is supposed to be the districts, but I think we should have been the Capitol because we're the ones paying to watch this as entertainment.
Yeah, like the chariot moment. I'm waving to the audience as if they are the Capitol. When we turn up to the Capitol, I'm looking at everyone as if they're the Capitol.
I don't know if that would have made the audience feel bad, but I think it would have showed how people who are not taking action against it are complicit in the system that they are accepting. I know everyone wants to think they would be Katniss, but framing the audience as aligned with the bad guys would put us in an adversarial role with the contestants, and maybe cause people to question their own acceptance of tyrannical government. Just a thought. This has nothing to do with any real-life political figures. Anyway, my sister and I were seated in Rue's section, and in my opinion, that was the only one that really worked. We definitely got the best section in the house. Despite all my complaints about the building, I did like our seats. We were in the very back row of the theater, which normally is not great, but this time I was pleasantly surprised. As I mentioned, they use a lot of the vertical space, which brought the characters up to our eye level during some of the biggest moments. Plus, I brought my opera glasses so I could look closer whenever I needed to, and it was awesome. They also had a big metal rail right in front of my seat, which would have totally obstructed my entire view if I sat at the back of my chair, but it was the perfect height to lean my arms on when I hunched forward to watch the show. Basically, everyone in my row was doing this because it was the only way to see the show, which is bad, but I found it funny. It's such bad design. Like, they knew where they were putting that pole. It blocks your whole view. Anyway, it wasn't the best for my posture, but it was weirdly comfortable, so I will take it. The coolest sequence in the show was the Tracker Jacker scene. The Tracker Jacker hive is a glowing breakaway ball suspended on wires that looks amazing. The stage lights are down, so the hive stands out with its beautiful golden glow. When Katniss cuts it down, the hive falls to the stage floor and breaks open. Each of the actors on the ground has what I'm guessing is a fiber optic wand in each hand, and they turn them on right when the hive crashes, and then they flail their arms around like the Tracker Jackers are stinging them all over. It was a very creative way of communicating the stinging, and I loved it. Really well done, team. After the Tracker Jacker fight, we get another of the coolest sequences in the show when two guys fought on our balcony. Katniss was supposed to be hallucinating from the Tracker Jacker venom, and to convey this, two actors came out of the door next to me that I wasn't allowed to use and proceeded to have a horizontal fight on the balcony seating in front of District 11. It was insane and I loved it. This is another reason why I felt like we had the best seats in the house, because they had their wire fight right in front of us, and then I got to watch them climb over the barrier and walk back into the hall with a stagehand, which I also found very cool. I think it's interesting to see how long people stay in character while they are standing in the audience, and the answer here was not very long. As much as I love this sequence, I do have a bone to pick with the set for the Tracker Jacker scene. They used a big metal rig to represent Katniss being up in a tree, and that was pretty weird. I get why they did it because they have actual flames shooting up behind her as she is running from the burning arena, but I still think they could have made it look a little more like a tree. I think they made this set metal so they could hide the fire mechanisms without it being a safety risk, because metal is less of a concern than a papier-mâché tree, but I still think they could have done something to convey that it's a tree.
What the heck are those two doing at a tree?
They have the metal ramp lowered at an almost 45-degree angle, so it never looks like a tree at any point. It looks like a catwalk that is suspended in the air above the tributes, which is what it is. It also makes it really silly when Cato tries to climb the catwalk and says he can't because it's too steep, but this is literally a ladder placed at a 45-degree angle. I've climbed harder hills in my neighborhood. In the film, you can see how it would be difficult for someone who has not grown up around woodlands to climb a tree on command while holding a knife and potentially dodging arrows. On stage, it makes Cato look inexplicably incompetent and dumb. I really like the choreography for the scene where Katniss blows up the supplies. In this version, she shoots a helmet that is suspended on wires, so when she hits it, they lower the helmet to the ground and let it drop to the floor. All of the items in the cornucopia are hanging from the ceiling when the audience returns from intermission, and it looks really cool. These designers love their vertical space. They also have Katniss suspended on wires so that when the explosion happens, she does cool flips to convey that she is being blown back by the force of the blast. I do think they could have done a better job conveying that Katniss lost her hearing from the explosion. My idea for this would be to have the tinnitus ringing sound, and then when Cato and the rest of the careers come back to kill the boy from District 3 who was supposed to be guarding the supplies, their mics could have a weird echo or warble effect so that they sound disorienting to the audience. I don't think Katniss lost her hearing at all in this version. Aya Augustine was fantastic as Rue. I definitely sobbed during her death scene, but I was also crying because I was thinking about the movie and how much better it was. The play intercuts Rue's death with people dancing and partying in the Capitol, and I hated this change. I get that it's supposed to show the vapidity of the Capitol, but it did not work for me. Ironically, it made me feel the crass commodification of the original book into this play. I could feel the corporate greed of this show's existence all of a sudden, and it made me dislike the show. They also have this weird musical backtracking when Katniss sings Deep in the Meadow, and I dislike that severely. It gave the performance a manufactured quality that is not present in the movie. Jennifer Lawrence's raw, crackly voice during this sequence felt so real and vulnerable.
Deep in the meadow.
I wanted that for the stage show as well, and was disappointed that we did not get this. There were actually several dance sequences in this show, and I found every single one of them very weird and awkward. Certain straight plays feel the need to include some sort of singing or dancing because they fear that the audience will leave if they don't have it, but I am fine with a straight play. The Hunger Games book and movie are pretty musical. I think Suzanne has leaned more into the songs with each successive book, which is a little weird for a written medium like a novel, but it works very well for film and on stage. However, the songs from the books are not what I take issue with. There are several dance interludes throughout the show. There is one with all the Capitol people, there's a dance sequence when the careers are hanging out beneath Katniss's tree, and there's a dance sequence in the middle of Katniss mourning Rue's death. These dance breaks weren't badly done, but they feel like another example of this show's need to make everything a spectacle. One of the things I love about the original Hunger Games book and movie is that it always grounds you in the reality that children are dying. The games are brutal and horrible. They are not cool. They are not glamorous. They are not something to be celebrated by anyone other than the callous Capitol dwellers. The point of the sequence where Katniss lays Rue to rest is that everyone stops what they are doing to watch her. Katniss captures the attention of Panem without meaning to. She makes herself a spectacle just by being human, which is what made Snow nervous from the very beginning. The entire Capitol doesn't change their behavior immediately, but they do stop momentarily. Even if they only care about Rue's death in a superficial or shallow capacity, like, oh, that part was so sad. That is still progress. People have cared about Katniss since they saw her essentially lay down her life for her younger sister, and that humanized her in a way tributes had not been prior. In the movies and the books, spectacle is a tool for manipulation and a tactic that is implemented in order to increase the odds of survival. The use of artificial spectacle is very intentional in the narrative. We have the flames during the chariot sequence, the flames in Katniss's dress, and the reveal of Peeta's feelings for Katniss during the interview.
Because she came here with me.
The feelings themselves are genuine, but the way Peeta reveals this to the Capitol audience is artificial. These are then contrasted with the moments of genuine human reaction, which become a spectacle unintentionally. Katniss's sacrifice at the reaping, shooting the apple, Rue's burial, Katniss and Peeta kissing, and the berry scene. The visual language of prior Hunger Games media trained the audience to see artificial spectacle as manipulation. It is a tactic that the tributes must use to get sponsors and make people like them. It's not their true self.
You have to make people like you.
As a result, the play's incorporation of artificial spectacle into previously genuine and grounded scenes felt manipulative to me. I think this could have worked if the audience was the Capitol. If they chose to frame the story of the 74th annual Hunger Games from the point of view of Capitol citizens watching everything play out, this would have been fine. But they chose to keep the stage adaptation rooted in Katniss's perspective, and I know it is her POV because she keeps telling us her inner monologue.
There's a lot of Katniss's inner monologue in our play.
And that does not support an interpretation of this work where the audience is the Capitol.
The way that Connor has done it is from Katniss's point of view, so we're in Katniss's mind.
Katniss is not manipulative. That's antithetical to her character. She has a very hard time charming people or making friends, as we see in Catching Fire.
All right, fine, then no one.
She is stubbornly herself. The only reason she came across as likable during her interview is because she talked about her sister.
I told her that I would try to win.
And that was not a tactic on her part. So this incorporation of spectacle into Katniss's POV does not align with how we know her. It's not for Katniss, and it's not for the audience because we are supposed to be the district citizens. So the only answer I can come up with is that this performance is for the men who came with their partners. They've never seen the movies nor read the books, and they don't really understand subtext in general. And I find that stupid and patronizing. I felt like the play did not trust the audience to see the contrast and couldn't allow a single moment of sincerity for fear that the audience would get bored and leave, which they couldn't do anyway. It felt out of touch with the messaging of the story, like the Hunger Games Subway tie-in.
Subway, where victors eat.
Or the 2013 Hunger Games makeup collection from CoverGirl.
An exclusive makeup line inspired by the world of the Capitol.
Speaking of makeup, Peeta's camouflage was really well done. They stuff him inside one of the smaller trapdoors in the floor, and it looks like they put some kind of flexible rubber over the top with a slit in the middle, so that when he pulls himself out, it looks like he was actually half buried in the ground. It doesn't look like dirt, but it does convey that he is half buried in this state. I found this scene really well integrated. I knew it was coming up in the show, and I was looking out for Peeta's hiding spot, but they really surprised me with this, which I loved. They used the same smaller trapdoor for the cave that Katniss and Peeta are supposed to be in, but this one did not work. It never felt like a cave, and it does not convey cave at all. Despite this bad cave, the Peeta and Katniss romance scenes were really cute. After they kissed in the cave, which is actually just the middle of the stage and does not look like a cave at all, Haymitch sent the first parachute. These were dropped from the catwalk, and they didn't really float in the way they were supposed to. It was something between a glide and a thunk every time a parachute dropped. which was a little funny, but honestly, I loved them. Katniss and Peeta get a little lost in their romance, and the parachutes fall around them in a really beautiful way before they and the audience are jolted back to reality by the firing of a cannon. It created some great contrast and was another of my favorite moments in the show. When Katniss is making her way back to Peeta after the fight with Clove, there's a weird scene where Katniss wades through a bunch of dead people and then Rue parts the sea like Moses and leads her to Peeta. They were all bending the tops of their bodies but keeping their feet planted. It was really impressive and a cool display of their abdominal control, but I did not remember this from the books, and I'm not sure what they were trying to convey. I think it was supposed to communicate her delirium post-altercation, but it felt weird. This probably would have worked better for the Tracker Jacker hallucination and not post-fight. I think it might have been a blood loss hallucination, but Katniss's cut wasn't as pronounced in this version, so it was hard to communicate that she had a head injury. I also think the actors were wearing trick shoes to create this effect. It seemed like the shoes were glued to the platform, so the actors had more stability. That's not a critique. This was still a very impressive display of strength and control. I just like to see how things are done. Because the space is so limited, there are no sets to divide it visually, and it was really hard to tell when someone could or could not see another person on stage. For example, Katniss might run right by someone, but metaphorically, she was in a different part of the forest.
There'll be times when it's 2 days has passed, but I've literally just been running.
And other times they were able to see each other. This was the silliest when Foxface was following Katniss and Peeta around because the set is so sparse that it just looked really goofy. Her name in this version is not Foxface. She has a real name. I think it's like Fila, but I completely forgot what it was. I'm just calling her Foxface for this video because that's how I know her and that's how she is in the movie. Foxface. They have exactly 4 trees on set that popped out of the smaller trapdoors, and these are supposed to be the berry bushes. But this was another example of how the lack of a physical set negatively impacted the show. Their reliance on screen-based sets is part of a trend in theater that I really dislike. In my opinion, it is so much harder to suspend your disbelief for a screen than it is for a painted skyline or a papier-mâché giant teapot. Speaking of screens, it was super lame that President Snow is just a screen. I kept my hopes high even going into Act 2 that he might show up live, and that did not happen. I thought this was very disappointing, and I don't know why they did this. John Malkovich is not a hard hitter with the Hunger Games demographic. The only thing I have seen him in was Secretariat in 2010, the horse movie.
Four! Well, I yelled for, you idiot. That's what for means.
Donald Sutherland wasn't super popular with the youths either, but he was in the 2005 Pride and Prejudice movie.
Your mother will never see you again if you do not marry Mr. Collins, and I will never see you again if you do.
Which made him a little more relevant for young female audiences in 2011. I was okay with the pre-recorded videos during the first half of Act 1 because that's how it is in the book and movie.
Terror of the war, widows, orphans.
Snow is not actually interacting with the people in District 12, and even when he talks to the crowd during the chariot parade, that was fine. The issue came about when he is supposed to have half pre-recorded dialogue scenes with other people. The President Snow video footage timing was not great. Sometimes he would pause for way too long, and other times the character he's supposed to be talking to hadn't finished their lines. I could not tell when he was supposed to be intentionally cutting them off versus messing up, so it felt like they were all mess-ups. It also ruins him as a villain. He does not feel scary because he is hidden behind a screen. He can't hurt me from within the grid.
The grid.
I really think the marketing team should have done a better job telling people John Malkovich was going to be a screen performance. I was able to find this in the small print of articles after I saw the show, but I feel like most of the media prior to the show's release did not express this. The YouTube Shorts ad I got after I already bought my tickets made it seem like John was going to stop by for a couple of minutes. Because if you're not going to have a live actor, why not make a cut of Donald Sutherland's performance from the movie? I'm sure they have way better quality footage of him, and you could probably work the script around whatever lines you have or don't have. When they got the rights to the songs, I'm pretty sure they could have worked out a sum of money that would be acceptable to use Donald's performance in the stage version. They added in the scene where President Snow's granddaughter starts styling her hair after Katniss, and my sister wants you all to know that this moment did not happen until Catching Fire. I also think this moment was very lame because in the movie we have this scene between Snow and his granddaughter.
When did you start wearing it like that?
Everyone at school wears it like this now, Grandpa.
In the play, Snow is pre-recorded and does not have a real granddaughter to have this interaction with because he's not even in the same country as us. So he has to just recount the entire interaction with his granddaughter, which is very lame and is an example of telling, not showing. He tells us something that happened instead of letting us see the interaction like the movie did. If they knew he was going to be a screen the entire time, I don't know why they even brought this up. The only thing that's interesting about it is that they are using lines from the sequel, but it is not a good anecdote to be told about. They knew the limitations of the screen performance would mean that we could not see this acted out live on stage, like a live production would be. So just cut it. It's doing nothing for anyone. My other bone to pick with President Snow is his costume. I'm pretty sure he does not wear a rose at any point in this play. Snow and roses are always linked together, even in the books, so where is my rose? The only time he isn't wearing one in the movie is when he is literally standing in his rose garden. I checked the promo video when I got home, and he's not wearing a rose there either.
When the Hunger Games takes this stage, I will be watching.
He has a weird plastic flower thing on his lapel, but that is not a rose. There is so much cool and spooky lore around the president and his obsession with roses. It is a key part of his character that is essential to any good portrayal of President Snow, and it would have been no problem to have a real rose because Snow is pre-recorded. You don't have to make a fake rose or buy real roses every night. You could just buy one bouquet for the video shoot and maybe an extra rose or two for pickups if they needed it. I don't know why they neglected this detail. My final issue with Snow is that without him being physically present, the show doesn't have a villain. The system of the Capitol is the antagonist, but this is a bit abstract. To remedy this, they semi-make Caesar Flickerman the villain, which I don't love as a change. He is characterized as being very two-faced and smarmy. During Act 2, Caesar interviews Prim, Gale, and Katniss's mother in District 12. He loudly comments about how gross he finds it being in 12. When Gale attempts to walk away, Caesar commands Gale with all his capital authority, which is what it is. But it kind of ruined the characterization for Caesar for me, and Katniss can't see this, so why is it happening? I think the really sinister thing about the Capitol is that most of the people aren't evil. They are also being oppressed by the system that they are living in, even if they are better off financially. They just don't want to look beyond their worldview because they will be killed or ostracized from their community. They want to uphold the status quo because that keeps them safe. I feel that right now. I feel scared to speak out in the US for fear of being shot or targeted by people. I want to help others, but I also feel like I'm barely keeping myself afloat. I understand the desire to have one villain that the audience can point to as the bad guy, but I think that making Caesar the embodiment of the Capitol is oversimplifying the evil of the system and of Snow himself. But I know they did this because they didn't really have a villain aside from the games because Snow was on a screen and therefore he didn't look intimidating at all. He was a really weak villain because we knew he couldn't hurt us because it would cost too much money for him to make an appearance. I couldn't find a better way to incorporate these points into my review, so here they are. It's time to talk about the elephant in the room. This program is huge and ridiculous. So this is this program, which is bigger than any other one on the West End, I'm pretty sure. It's ginormous. This is a Broadway playbill. It could eat this for lunch. This is so unnecessarily big. And I don't know what to do with this. Like, this is bigger than the books. This is bigger than any book I own. This is like a coffee table book. I'm supposed to do what with this brochure now? I guess I have to I'm not gonna put it on my wall. It would take up the whole thing. Apparently they don't do free playbills on the West End, and honestly, neither does Broadway. The program is included in your ticket price. But on the West End, you have to buy the special official souvenir brochures to learn about the cast and crew, and I think that's really dumb. This is a scam, and the West End needs to rebel against this policy. I believe that the audience is owed a program with the names of the actors and their bios. I also think the producers owe it to the actors and creative team to give this to every person who comes in. The program is the only opportunity for some members of the creative team to receive their due credit. That 50-word bio is the only appreciation the dressers get, and keeping it behind a paywall is unkind to the creative team. This practice is not exclusive to the Hunger Games, but I'm not talking about any other shows right now. I know I can look the cast information up online, but it's not the same. They update the cast and crew webpage when new people take over roles, so it's hard to track down which cast you saw unless someone was nice enough to fill in the chart on Wikipedia, or you took a screenshot of the website when you checked originally. If they had a digital program that was archived with each of the versions, I would be slightly more accepting of this concept, concept, but not by much. Some Broadway shows will sell the big souvenir brochures with exclusive photos and interviews with the cast, but they still provide the free programs to every patron. As someone who loves to have physical mementos in our increasingly digital age, this really sucks. My tickets were online, so I don't have those as a physical reminder, and the program is entirely online, so I don't have that as a reminder, and I dislike all of this. So I did pay £12 for this brochure, but that's insane. This thing still has 4 pages of ads in it, which I think is complete BS. I exclusively bought it for the program. Do not advertise to me unless it's free. That's common courtesy. If Broadway adopts this policy of paying for programs, I will boycott. Also, call me crazy, but if I pay £12 for a souvenir program, I want it to include exclusive photos that are not already posted for free on the Hunger Games Instagram page.
Okay, that's actually crazy.
I don't even know what to do with this program because it's too big to fit in my Broadway binder and it's not even consistent with other West End programs. This is anarchy. I volunteer as tribute to connect all West End theaters with Playbill.com so they can get with the program and stop mistreating their patrons. The paper quality is obviously much nicer than my free program from Smash, but the price tag kills some of the fun of having a program. I usually love having signed programs from shows, but I didn't want anyone to touch my £12 souvenir brochure, which I think impacts business. I was considering buying some merchandise, but after feeling scammed into buying an item that is free with admission for Broadway, regional, and high school theater in America, I didn't want to give these guys any more of my money. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the drama from opening night. The website states that doors open 2 hours before showtime and recommends guests arrive early. However, on opening night, the doors to the theater remained firmly closed at showtime, and hundreds of guests had to wait hours in the rain before finally being let inside. Many people stated online that they were not told anything about what was going on and were just left in the rain with no clue what was causing the delay. Questioning the staff did not yield any helpful results, and there were no awnings outside the theater where they could get cover from the elements. The theater was clearly not designed to have a line of people waiting outside in the rain, as you can tell from my bathroom break. Others online said they saw construction workers actively carrying supplies into the building less than 30 minutes before showtime. I speculate that construction was going on right up until the second that they allowed the audience into the theater. During this time, camera crews were allegedly running around the crowds, capturing live footage of the hope fading from the audience's eyes. I have not seen this footage at all in their social media posts, and I assume that's because they are too embarrassed to post these videos after such a disastrous opening preview night. And rightly so. That is really embarrassing for them. The website is also incorrect about the runtime of the show. Online, it says the show is 2 hours and 40 minutes, including a 15-minute intermission. When I saw it, The Hunger Games was a full 3 hours long. It started at 7:30 p.m., and I took a photo just after the show finished at 10:38 p.m. This was fine for me and my sister, but on the opening preview night, the show didn't start until 8:30 p.m. and ran until almost midnight. As I mentioned, Canary Wharf is kind of in the middle of nowhere, and it's pretty far from central London. As a result of the delay, a lot of people ended up leaving the show at intermission, so they didn't miss their trains home. They likely could have stayed for a bit of Act 2, but they were probably worried about being trapped by the moving seats or not being allowed to leave. Many of those who stayed on opening night had to pay for expensive cab rides home because that was the only option when they were released at midnight on Monday. Well, I guess it was actually Tuesday by that point. I also wanted to note that we were some of the last people to exit the theater, and something funny did happen as we were leaving. We waited quite a bit to leave. I was taking photos of the exposed wires, and also I didn't want to join the mad rush for the stairs, so I just sat for a little bit and felt the platform shake ominously as we waited for the crowds to die down. It turned out they were filming promotional material for the show on the night that my sister and I attended. They were taking photos and videos of the preview as well as the audience reactions. After the show, they were interviewing audience members in the lobby. They had one camera guy and a man on the mic asking people questions about the show. I'm guessing these are the same people who were running around on opening night. At one point, we saw the camera guy coming for us, and my sister and I sprinted away into the bathroom because I simply could not show my face in promotional materials for this play. I think I would have expired on the spot. I also really didn't want to waste their time because I knew all of my footage would be unusable. For an actor, I have a really bad poker face and am not good at pretending I enjoyed a show when I did not. I did see some of the people from my preview night on the Hunger Games on Stage Instagram page, so that was fun. Good for them. Now back to the show. There's a style of theater from the 1970s called theater of the oppressed, which was created by Brazilian playwright Augusto Boal. This style is sometimes referred to as just Boal, or at least that's how my friends and I called it. Boal explores theater as a means of activism and views the audience as active participants rather than passive spectators who are being subjected to whatever the actors show them. It works to break down the power imbalance between the viewers and the viewed, and it aims to provoke a response from people. I think if the Hunger Games were not such a big property, they could have done something really interesting utilizing elements from theater of the oppressed. Boal is very politically left-leaning, which might be an issue for the marketability of a show like this, but I would argue that the Hunger Games is also left-leaning, so that's fine. At times, it felt like they were trying to engage the audience, like with the red lights that connected each section with a specific tribute. That gave the audience ownership over that life and potentially guilt over their passing. It made us responsible for playing into the system of Panem. However, they only did this when the tribute died, so it already felt too late at that point. We couldn't connect with the tribute because they were gone. I still couldn't tell you which district Hedel or Drove are from, the exception being if you already knew and cared about your tribute ahead of time like I did. But even then, I didn't know we were seated in Rue's section instead of Thresh's section. Also, it's harder for people to connect with someone like Marvel when they already know what he does in the book. The audience engagement could have come up more if this was a brand new play from the world of the Hunger Games, but not specifically the story of Katniss and Peeta. In my mind, the play would be an earlier game that we have never seen before. They could have a new story with new characters for the audience to care about. The first Hunger Games book sows the seeds of dissent, but does not have an all-out rebellion. It's a good read, but I think you need the other two books to feel like the story is complete. If it wasn't going to feel satisfying anyway, they might as well do a new story with its own arc. And while they're at it, they should take my suggestion from earlier and make the audience the capital instead of the districts. Then the audience could vote for who they think will win, and that is why each section is named for a different district. They could still do the red lights for each tribute death, but instead of it being because that section is representative of the people in the district, the lights mean that you have lost. The tribute you bet on died, and that means you failed. I imagine it having a similar energy to the betting pool from Cabin in the Woods.
Dig deep, people. Betting windows are closing.
They could do a similar lighting thing when tributes are sent sponsor gifts. If the audience was the capital, they could indicate which section sent the sponsor gift for specific tributes whenever it happens. Obviously, the audience wouldn't have control over when this occurs in the narrative, but it would potentially make them feel like they are having an effect on the show. That is their sponsor gift saving someone, and they can feel smug about it, or jealous when someone else's tribute gets saved. Even without these interactive theater elements, I think a new story would bring less baggage, and therefore the show could experiment more with themes and give us new characters for the audience to like. Even in my review, I compared a lot of the events of the play to the book and movie. I think it's impossible not to think of Jennifer Lawrence's performance of Deep in the Meadow, or Josh Hutcherson hiding as a rock, or Elizabeth Banks as Effie Trinket. If they wanted to avoid these comparisons, a new original play would probably have been a better fit. They could still do something similar to Harry Potter and the Cursed Child by having some characters the audience would recognize. They could do Joanna Mason's games, or have Haymitch introduce himself at some point. That way the audience still sees characters they know, but the story itself is new. Overall, I think this might be a decent show after the rest of the theater gets built and they figure out the timing for the video screens, but right now I don't think it's worth seeing. I loved elements of the show, but the theater going experience is appalling, and it really affected my enjoyment of the night out. I certainly would not trust anything else Troubadour Theaters churns out in the next few years without bringing a hard hat and a pack of adult diapers. I would check back in 2 to 3 months, confirm if they actually finished construction, and then maybe I'd get tickets if they were on sale. If you were my family, I wouldn't send you to this show. You're paying up to £365 to visit an active construction zone, and that just doesn't sit right with me. Honestly, I hope this show tanks. It is a massive failure in terms of the actual adaptation of Suzanne Collins's work, and the producers think it's too big to fail. I think it would be really fitting for this story if the good people of London took a stand against their capitalist overlords by letting the show crumble. Welcome to the 76th annual Hunger Games, everyone!